Welcome on the Cosmic Atom. Never apologize for being intelligent in a world that benefits from ignorance. Allow that to marinate. You see, the selected ones. There's a peculiar quiet that follows. Brilliance. Not adulation or adoration, but stress. An unspoken resentment. People don't necessarily dislike you because you're incorrect. They detest you because you are correct. Too quickly, too often, and too effortlessly. And what happens if you refuse to reduce your soul just to get a seat at their wobbly table of mediocrity? They get enraged. They get outraged. They call you odd, too deep, difficult to connect with. But let us be honest. You're not tough. You're just incorruptible. Let's start with a hard reality. According to behavioral study, individuals often regard intellect as a social danger rather than a gift, particularly when it is not sugar-coated, dumbed down, or asking for favor. Translation: your stillness in a room full of surface-level interactions seems like an earthquake to individuals who have constructed their identities on shaky foundation. And do not lie. You felt it. You've walked into rooms and seen individuals struggle for significance. You've had to fake a chuckle during discussions that seemed like brain cells were dying. You've been invited out just to sit there thinking, Lord, take me to a galaxy where people speak about anything meaningful. But they don't comprehend that you weren't born to them. You were born with the ability to disrupt. You're not antisocial. You're just allergic to bullshit. So buckle up, because now we're getting into the true reason. Your stubbornness to dumb down has the whole room squirming. And believe me, it goes deeper than mere ego. It's about power and control, spiritual battle, and the perilous reality of being too alert to be controlled. Let's go. Number one, they do not want you to fit in. They want you to shrink. You're not being rejected because of your differences. You're being rejected because you won't shrink. That is the true problem. The folks around you are not seeking for anybody unique. They hoped you were little enough to make them feel large. But you didn't play along. You didn't pretend to be confused when you really understood something. You didn't act stupid to fit into superficial discussions. You did not drop your voice to make others feel louder. And that was what irritated them. People feel more at ease when they can manage, foresee, and outperform others. But you strolled in with this unabashed knowledge, this serene, unbothered presence, and their masks began to fall, causing the faux confidence to crumble. Your intellect, spiritual awareness, and capacity to sit quietly and observe things. That isn't simply remarkable to them. It's scary, since it indicates they can't control you, outwit, or distract you with surface-level games. You were not attempting to seem superior. You simply weren't willing to make yourself smaller so others could feel bigger. And when there's an underlying expectation that you'll water yourself down, dumb things down, and grin and nod at nonsense, refusing becomes revolt. They start labeling you difficult, not serious, and aloof. But deep down, they know you're not chilly. You're clear. You weren't born to pretend that you weren't wired to care about other people's fears. And no, you don't have to lower yourself to be with them. If the only way to be accepted is to dilute oneself, it is not acceptance, it is control. The reality is they're not upset with you. They're upset with what your rejection exposes. It shows that they made a compromise. It shows that they have settled for mediocrity. It demonstrates that they've been appearing to be confident when they've really been acting. And when someone turns up who doesn't need to act and isn't participating in the social games, it shatters the whole illusion on which they've constructed their identity. You did nothing wrong. You simply did not play small. And in a culture that equates humility with concealment, that alone makes you dangerous. Number two, their offensive serves as a defense against your depth. People claim they desire depth, but then they drown in it. The reality is, speaking from a position of clarity, truth, and profound understanding disturbs folks who have spent their whole lives swimming on the surface. That is why your very existence may be offensive to certain individuals, even if you have done nothing to them. The issue isn't with your tone, enthusiasm, or words. The actual issue is that you represent a level of complexity that they are not prepared to handle. You did not start an argument. You did not degrade anybody. All you did was be yourself. However, this applies to persons who are emotionally shallow, psychologically complacent, or spiritually unprepared. Your presence sets off an internal response. You reveal what they've been trying to avoid inside themselves, and their grins tighten, their jokes get drier, and their tone changes. They begin to respond not because you assaulted them, but because they feel seen in a manner they were not prepared for. That is why you have them perplexed. On one hand, they are attracted to you. There's something magnetic about how grounded you are. You don't seek approval. You don't say things just to fit in. You're solid. As a result, people get inquisitive. However, they dislike that same energy since it causes them to feel unstable in contrast. You remind them of the self-work they've ignored. You remind them of the falsehoods they've told themselves to get by socially. It's simpler for them to characterize you as overly passionate than to confess they've never developed the emotional or spiritual depth you naturally possess. You refuse to indulge in gossip. Your indifference in unnecessary drama. Your ability to sit quietly and still dominate the room. All of this challenges individuals who have constructed their identities around noise. And no, it is not your responsibility to make your presence more palatable. You were not brought here to be pleasant. You were not picked to reduce your authority in order to make others comfortable. If someone is offended by your depth, it indicates that they have been living shallowly. That is not your weight to bear. You aren't the issue. You are the truth. They have been attempting to avoid. And the reality always shakes those who live in fantasy. Number 3, they were not attempting to befriend you. They were attempting to manage you. Some of those who attempted to draw you and were not doing it out of love or respect. They were attempting to control you. They did not wish to comprehend you. They intended to manage you from the start. Their true purpose wasn't connection. It was about containment. They saw your brilliance, insight, and clarity. And rather than being inspired, they felt intimidated. So they decided that if they could keep you near, they could keep you little. They were not interested in getting to know you. They were attempting to darken you without coming off as the villain. That's why you were subjected to passive-aggressive jokes and backhanded compliments and talks that appear to focus around attempting to humble you. They didn't want your intellect to shine too brightly in the room since it made it more difficult for them to ignore you, which broke the social dynamic. You didn't attempt to dominate anybody, yet your honesty threw things off. You exuded confidence without being arrogant. You could detect manipulation before it appeared. You didn't laugh at nonsense or pretend to be interested in trivial things. That's what struck them. They couldn't change you into a more palatable version of yourself. You were uncontrollable, and this is what made you the issue. You undoubtedly observed how the vibe changed after you stopped playing along. When you did not tone yourself down, when you did not participate in the small chat or gossip, suddenly the invitation slowed down. People began to see you as distant or too serious. But the fact is that they were not seeking for a companion. They were seeking for someone who would stick to their script. And when you refused, they were chilly. It's a pattern that most selected ones experience. People want to analyze, dissect, and degrade you not out of curiosity, but to find out how to manage something they don't comprehend. You broke their strategy when you chose self-respect above social acceptance, when you refused to laugh at things that weren't amusing, and when you realized you didn't need to be liked to feel validated. They knew they couldn't cage you in. That's when they began to back away. Not because you changed, but because you refuse to let others alter you. Number 4, you're the mirror that shows them that their growth has ceased. When you develop, you don't have to say anything to make others uncomfortable. Your development speaks for itself. It's in your decisions, your tranquility, your ideals, and how you walk differently today. You no longer want affirmation. You will no longer accept disorder. You aren't playing the same emotional games. That move alone reveals that others have remained precisely where they have always been. And here is where the conflict starts. You did not assault anybody. You did not criticize anybody. You just stopped shrinking. You stopped being emotionally open to talks that went nowhere. You stopped bending your soul to frequencies that were no longer beneficial to you. But in doing so, you unwittingly become a mirror, although not a pleasing one that reveals the reality that people have been avoiding. They claim you switched up, but you just stopped pretending. You stopped being the version of yourself that was easier for them to accept. And the minute you stood completely, and as you are today, they had to confront the painful reality that they had been caught in the same cycles, habits, and mentality for years. And you've outgrown it. It is not personal. It is not always conscious. Some individuals don't know they're projecting until your presence pushes them to confront what they've overlooked about themselves. They assumed you were on the same level, but as you began to evolve, they understood you had just been patient. You were not equal. You just empathized. And now that you've progressed past that point, they're left with the harsh reality. They prioritized comfort above progress. They preferred familiarity over change. So now, when they see you walking in clarity, they feel vulnerable, not because you called them out, but because your elevation has. Your frequency began to impact their wounds. Your healing emphasized their avoidance. Your tranquility amplified their pandemonium. That explains why the energy shifted. This is why the support disappeared. That's why they began behaving as if you thought you were superior than them. But the reality is, you're not better. You're only a little farther away. And sometimes the most insulting thing you can do is continue to develop amid those who believe that remaining the same is strength. You're not their adversary. You're their wake-up call. That's why they're avoiding you now. Number 5, you have violated the unstated law of spiritual compliance. The majority of social places follow an unseen norm. People form a silent agreement without stating it out. Keep everything secure. Keep everything basic. Don't get too in-depth. Avoid overthinking. Do not disrupt the vibe of the room. Play along. Smile. Numb yourself just enough to fit in. That is the deal. This is what keeps most people in accord, even when the truth suffocates the space. But you breached the rule. You didn't just show up. You showed up with vision, depth, and clarity. You talk from areas most people have not ventured to go inside themselves. You didn't hesitate to say what no one else would. You were unwilling to be stupid merely to be accepted. And when you did that, the air shifted. You weren't being impolite. It was not that you were arrogant. It's only that you introduced truth into an environment that was predicated on delusion. You began discussing topics that could not be shrugged off or swept under the rug. You addressed the emotional elephant in the room without apologizing. You posed questions that pushed individuals to look within. You didn't talk to win the debate. You spoke to stop the cycle. And that's when the reaction started. Because here's the deal. Most individuals are not attempting to develop. They're attempting to maintain. They do not desire depth. They want diversion. They don't want the truth. They want consolation. When someone like you steps in and refuses to be watered down, you compel them to experience all they've been avoiding. That is why they're trying to silence you. That is why they isolate themselves. That is why people begin to say things like you are too much or you take things too seriously. It's not that you are incorrect. They aren't ready. You did not come to fit in. You come to awaken. However, waking individuals isn't as exciting as it sounds. It's lonely and misunderstood. It is rejected because individuals would battle for their limits before accepting freedom. You're not being rejected for being tough. You're being opposed for breaking the spiritual spell that everyone else has chosen to remain under. That indicates you're doing precisely what you were meant to accomplish. Number 6, they wanted to control you, not comprehend you. The invitation was fraudulent from the start. It was not about connecting, comprehending, or creating anything tangible. It was all about control. You were invited into the group, not because they respected what you had, but because they regarded you as a danger that needed to be contained. They felt your might. They sensed your wisdom. And instead of rising to meet you, they attempted to diminish you. They did not wish to comprehend your point of view. They did not want to hear your truth. What they truly wanted was to tame you, to dilute your energy so that it wouldn't reveal their own. They wanted to soften your voice, diminish your energy, and transform your might into something more controllable. When you refused to compromise your frequency and did not follow their unstated rules, the labels began to fly. Suddenly, you became difficult, not because you were unpleasant, but because you established limits. You were haughty, not because you believed you were superior, but because you refused to let them trick you into thinking less of yourself. You were antisocial, not because you were chilly, but because you refused to engage in meaningless talks only to fill space. These labels were not about you. They were discussing their discomfort. Your resistance to shrink forced them to face their own failure to expand. They couldn't digest anybody. They were unable to dominate. And in a society where control is mistaken for connection, you become dangerous. They did not expect you to remain true to yourself. They assumed you'd adapt. They assumed you'd compromise your authenticity for acceptability. But you didn't. You remained rooted. You maintained a frequency high. And the more you did, the more it became clear who was simply wanting to get close to you so they could keep you little. That is the truth. Most individuals will not say it aloud. They wanted your presence, not your power, image, or integrity. They didn't want to develop with you. They intended to box you in. And when you refused to shrink, they were terrified because they understood they couldn't possess, mold, or silence you. And that's when the masks came off. Number 7, your language does not belong in the matrix. The manner you talk, the ideas you carry, and the energy that drives your words. It is inconsistent with the programming of this reality. You do not talk in circles. You do not talk to impress. You say the truth. Not just surface-level truth, but soul. Deep, ancient, multifaceted truth slices through illusions like a sword. That is why people appear puzzled when you speak. That's why talks abruptly get silent. It's not that you stated anything incorrectly. Your language is not anchored in the matrix. It is not part of the social script that they were taught to obey. You are not utilizing repeated phrases. You're not following current trends. Your words stem from alignment, not performance. You don't talk to garner applause. You talk to awaken. You don't talk for affirmation. You talk because the message requires it. That alone sets you distinct. That is also why people are concerned, since they are unable to locate you. You are not speaking like a follower. You aren't repeating what the audience says. You're drawing from a source that most of them haven't even discovered inside themselves. They've been taught to speak in loops, gossip, superficial viewpoints, half-baked, heated takes, and whatever. Sounds nice enough to not be judged. You don't care if it's comfy. You're concerned about if it's genuine. And this alone makes your voice disruptive. It's not hostile or violent. It's just too pure for a noise-based system. You did not choose to be an outcast. You just refused to express falsehoods in a language that everyone else has accepted as normal. You found it unpleasant to reduce your voice to something tiny enough to fit into surface-level interactions. So you quit trying. And as you did, the gap became clear. Not because you wanted to be above everyone, but because Your frequencies couldn't exist in watered-down environments. That is why they gaze. That is why they ridicule. That's why folks murmur behind your back that you're unusual, weird, or intense. They don't detest you. You remind them that there's a better way to talk, think, and live. And it challenges everything they've come to terms with. You did not lose your voice. You just outgrown their language. Number 8, you're not intimidating. They are spiritually unprepared. People love to use the term, "you're too much," as if it were helpful feedback. However, it is not about you being too much. They are spiritually, psychologically, and emotionally unprepared. You are not intimidating. You're simply totally here, alert and awake. And that's unusual. When someone turns up in their entirety, it immediately exposes everyone else who has been surviving on pieces. They accuse you of being too passionate or excessive and advise you to tone it down. But what they truly mean is that we don't have the ability to meet you where you are. Your energy reaches them in areas they have been avoiding. Your understanding reveals facts people do not want to confront. Your confidence amplifies their self-doubt. You aren't doing too much. They've just been doing too little for too long. You stroll into a room and change the ambience without trying. That is not intimidation. That is alignment. That is what occurs when someone accomplishes the inner work and radiates light without the need for accolades. However, most individuals have not done that kind of labor. To avoid seeming insecure, they're used to feigning confidence, basing their identity on the affirmation of others, and being humble. When you go in grounded and unapologetic, people feel vulnerable. Instead of rising up, they withdraw and throw shade. The issue is not your elevation. It's their lack of preparedness. They haven't laid the groundwork for dealing with someone who refuses to relinquish authority. They've spent so long equating humility with quiet, strength with politeness and wisdom, credentials with credentials, that when someone like you speaks the unfiltered truth, they don't know what to do. So they refer to it as ego. They call it arrogance, but they're really projecting. They refuse to recognize that your presence motivates them to progress. That would indicate that they have work to do. And for many, it is too much of a reflection to bear. You do not need to be less. You were never too much. You were simply sent ahead. And now your energy acts like a checkpoint. Not everyone is prepared for you. However, this does not imply you should make yourself easy to swallow. It indicates they should start chewing on the reality. Number 9, they cannot influence something they do not comprehend. One of the primary reasons you are so misunderstood is because you do not move in the manner that most people anticipate you to. You do not need continual care. You do not ask for approval. You do not twist yourself into something. You are not merely to be loved. That type of self-assurance perplexes those who are used to manipulating others via affirmation, flattery, silence, or guilt. When you do not react to their techniques, they feel powerless. And this is when the deception begins to backfire. Most manipulation is based on the belief that you need something from the manipulator, such as their attention, admiration, or participation. However, when you go in with your identity and self-worth already established, they see something unpleasant. You aren't here to gratify them. You're not seeking their approval. You're not looking for a place at the table. As a result, they are unable to entice you with traditional bait. They attempt to make you doubt yourself by withholding congratulations or making questionable remarks. They will put you to the test by acting coldly or passive-aggressively. But you do not flinch. You do not shrink. You simply keep being yourself. That burns them, not because you are harming them, but because they are unable to manage you. This kind of independence is uncommon, especially in a culture conditioned for codependency, where individuals are encouraged to mimic what others desire in order to avoid confrontation and conform into societal norms. Your unwillingness to participate in that game seems like resistance. You do not have a rebellious mentality. You have rebellious energy. You do not crumple under strain. You don't bend simply because someone with phony confidence attempts to make you feel inferior. This is what makes you hazardous to manipulators. They are frustrated because they are unable to elicit a response from you. They don't understand why their games don't function. It's because you can see through them. When emotional control manifests itself, you identify it and start it rather than nourish it. You don't pursue something you know isn't in line with your soul, and it is what makes you powerful. You cannot be ensnared by something you're not attempting to capture. Your peace is not negotiable. Your identity is not a social experiment, and no one can claim ownership of your presence until they understand it. Number 10, your thinking challenges their control mechanisms. Something about the way your mind operates breaks down the barriers that keep individuals in positions of power. It is not loud. It is not aggressive. It's obvious. You aren't frightened to think differently. It gets much worse. You are not frightened to tell what you observe. You do not repeat what is popular. You do not follow the herd only to maintain the peace. Your opinions are honest, prophetic, and firmly based in reality. This makes you a danger to systems that rely on confusion and obedience. You weren't programmed like the others. You question stuff. You investigate trends. You peek underneath the surface. And you do not need permission to talk about what you perceive. That is what worries individuals who have gained their power by keeping others preoccupied, dependent, and sleepy. When you speak from a position of truth rather than performance, popularity, or profit, the message is received differently. It doesn't only sound intelligent. It sounds free. Freedom is infectious. That is why they are trying to silence you. They do not strive to silence you because you are incorrect. They do this because you are effective. You slice through the cacophony. You speak things that others are hesitant to utter, and you don't back down just because someone in authority raises an eyebrow. You're not for sale. That alone destabilizes a system that relies on purchasing people's allegiance and silencing those who see too much. You are not meant to entertain. You were designed to reveal. And every time you open your lips and speak without seeking affirmation, you deconstruct a little bit of the phony universe they've spent years attempting to maintain. You draw back the curtain without asking for applause. You dump the truth in a room that only want echo chambers. That's why you were seen as excessively intense or radical. However, they're just names used when someone begins to question their comfy illusions. The intellect is not a weapon. This is a wake-up call, and most people are not prepared to be alert. They've been trained to obey and agree to repeat you. You've been schooled by the truth. And truth does not remain silent when allies speak. They don't need you to remain quiet since you are disruptive. They need you quiet because your awareness is shattering their delusion. A bold phrase at a time. Number 11. You're an invitation. They're not prepared to accept. You don't need to preach. You don't need to press. Simply being yourself serves as an invitation. An enthusiastic challenge that suggests there's more. You are capable of growing. You are capable of evolving. However, not everyone desires that level of transparency. Growth seems appealing until it forces people to abandon their comfort zones, justifications, and old dysfunctions. And there's where they draw the line. Your very existence destroys their denial. The way you walk, talk, think, heal, and choose your route. It all sheds a light on the places where they have become stagnant. Many people become defensive rather than motivated. Because when someone like you comes in, it reminds them that they've been playing small, keeping safe, and ignoring their true calling. You did not intend to confront them. You just existing in your completeness. But it is enough to rock the foundation of someone who has been hiding from theirs. They know they could do better. They are aware that they have not completed all of their tasks. They are aware that they have disregarded the warning indications and suppressed their inner voice. And when you come around, you stir everything up. You remind them that the life they have accepted is not the one they were meant to live. Instead of seeing this as an opportunity to advance, they see it as a justification to push you aside. It is simpler for them to evaluate you than to analyze themselves. It's simpler to accuse you of being too spiritual or serious than it is to realize they've been sleeping on their own potential. This is why you became a menace. Not because you're threatening, but because your life shows they've settled. You're living proof that another path is possible. And that fact might be uncomfortable for someone who is still determined to dodge accountability. You did not come to make others feel small. You came to remind them of their abilities. Unfortunately, not everyone wants to remember. Some would rather reject you than confront themselves. So they isolate themselves. They marginalize you. They critique your decisions. But it's not truly about you. It's about how your presence affects people. You are the invitation they have been hoping for, but aren't ready to accept. So they slam the door, not understanding they've walked away from their own awakening. Number 12, they hope to utilize your brightness without letting it shine. Many individuals in your life never really respected you. They just valued what they could obtain from you. They recognized your brightness, clarity, and intuition and, rather than supporting it, attempted to suppress it. They were content as long as your genius remained behind closed doors. As long as your abilities helped people appear better, think deeper, or move more efficiently. But as you came out of the shadows and into your own limelight, the vibe shifted. Suddenly, they stopped clapping. They were suddenly silent. Some people become passive-aggressive, not because you injured them, but because you stopped concealing what they were really expecting to get from you. Stepping into your full potential reveals their true motives. They never really backed you. They were just feeding off your essence, thinking you would never completely know how strong you are. These are the same folks who would refer to you as family, closest friend, or selected, but would remain curiously quiet when others complimented you. They wanted you to be accessible, but not elevated. They wanted your expertise in private, but not in public. They were happy with your excellence as long as it remained in their shadow, didn't challenge their image, and didn't outperform the version of you they were comfortable with. But when you stopped lowering your light, they felt exposed because your development caused their mask to slip. You weren't simply a helpful buddy anymore. You stood in your heavenly power. You weren't just delivering counsel. You were embodying the power they attempted to take from you. And this made them uneasy, not because you changed, but because you refused to let them use you. The reality is that they appreciated your radiance the whole time. However, appreciation leads to hatred when individuals learn they can no longer manage what they formerly thought they could. You turned into a mirror. They didn't ask for one that revealed what they secretly desired, but were unwilling to pursue. So they're calling you arrogant. They claim you swapped up. They pretend to be perplexed by your progress. But deep down, they understand the truth. You did not become someone else. You eventually become the version of yourself they had hoped you'd never find. Number 13, you can see through the games, so you refuse to play. Most individuals don't understand how much of their social lives are planned. Everyone is expected to play unstated roles. The amiable one, the listener, the entertainer, the attention seeker, and the one who laughs at unfunny things to maintain the peace. It is a silent pact based on pretending, in which authenticity is seen as a danger. But you saw through it. You could feel the fakeness, the forced enthusiasm, and the superficial connection. You just refused to play along. You didn't sign up for the drama, gossip, or phony support that vanishes when you aren't needed. You did not promise to fake merely to fit in. And that rejection shocked people because, without realizing it, your genuineness made the performance seem silly. You were not attempting to outshine anybody. You didn't have to act to feel validated, and it made you dangerous. In rooms full of individuals whose whole feeling of belonging is contingent on wearing the appropriate mask, you called their bluff. You didn't participate in the emotional manipulation. You didn't participate in the drama merely to be included. You didn't engage in trivial talks only to fill the quiet. You revealed your true nature, and the whole room seemed off balance. That's why people call you difficult to be around. Not because you are cruel or antisocial, but because they cannot fake it in front of you. Your presence requires the truth. That is too much for individuals whose relationships are based on shared illusions and mutual denial. They are not accustomed to being seen without their masks. They're not used to having someone shout out the energy rather than following the script. You become the flaw in their deception. The only individual who couldn't be deceived, guilt, or emotionally baited. So now, they're trying to find out how to explain your absence. They describe you as aloof, detached, or chilly. However, they understand why you left. You were not rude. You were real. The fact is that the majority of them do not know how to be that. They punished you for it, not because you did anything wrong, but because you ruined a game. They were too attached to it to realize it was never genuine in the first place. Number 14. You're not lonely. You are in heavenly solitude to safeguard your frequency. They assume you're simply keeping to yourself, that you're standoffish, antisocial, and perhaps even stuck up. They don't comprehend, however, that your seclusion is not random. It is by divine design. You're not lonely. You are in heavenly seclusion, and it's one of the most misunderstood stages in a selected person's life. It is not about being alone. It is about being kept. There's a reason you stopped wanting to show up where you used to feel compelled. Why? Certain locations now seem excessively noisy, false, and depleting. You aren't growing bitter. You're growing sharper, spiritually aware. You aren't concealing. You're being concealed. God chose you out of the throng, not to punish you, but to protect you since your frequency is unusual. The more precious something is, the more secure it must be. You're going through a filtering process, and not everything will make it through. Conversations that used to interest you now seem empty. People you previously trusted suddenly seem vulnerable. The environments you formerly tolerated suddenly feel poisonous. That doesn't mean you're broken. That indicates that you are developing. Your soul is outgrowing the social habits you used to rely on. This divide is sacred. It is where clarity emerges, your judgment sharpens, and your talents function uninterrupted. Because, let's be honest, in order to retain relationships, you had to dilute certain aspects of yourself. You had to dumb down, play small, or conceal your truth in order to avoid making others uncomfortable. But not anymore. You were never designed to blend into the background noise. You were supposed to rise beyond it. They are unable to reach you today since they were not intended to. Some were assigned to distract rather than build. Some people simply respected you because they could use your energy for free. But heavenly seclusion breaks the cycle. It reveals who's who. It humbles you, but also elevates you. So, no, you aren't antisocial. You're not lonely. You are being spiritually confined because the next level demands clarity, not company protection, nor popularity. This is a hallowed pause before the heavenly launch. When it's time for you to resurface, people won't recognize you since you won't be the same version they previously had access to. You did not come here to fit in. You come here to awaken people. That is why you have always felt out of place in small groups and hollow chats. You're not odd, tough, or antisocial. You're just vibrating at a frequency they've never heard before. Your reluctance to dumb yourself down and laugh at what isn't humorous. Pretending to be liked isn't a weakness. It is your spiritual strength. You're not chilly. You are clear. You're not arrogant. You and I are in agreement. And the more they attempt to label you, exclude you, or alter your story, the more they demonstrate how much your existence undermines the fiction they've constructed their lives on. Allow them to speak. Allow them to misinterpret. Let them deal with your absence. Because the reality is, you are the quiet uprising they did not see coming. You didn't just reject conformity. You personified truth. And this is the most powerful danger of all. So, remain high. Continue to be unusual. Maintain sacredness. This walkway was never intended to be congested. In your isolation, that is heaven's shelter, not punishment. Keep glowing in the rooms. You have to construct yourself. You were never supposed to be a member of this carnival. You were born to demolish it. Your presence represents a frequency. Not everyone is capable of holding it. And that's precisely the purpose. If this message touched your spirit and reminded you of who you really are, don't keep it to yourself. Someone else needs this truth. So go ahead. And if you like the film, please leave a comment with your ideas or experiences and share it with someone who is on the same road of holy solitude and honesty. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell, because this place is for the chosen, the awakened, and the unshakable. More raw truth, profound insight, and spiritual fire are on their way. Let us keep climbing together. God bless you. Dear viewers, your support through Super Chat and membership is the only source of income that keeps this channel running. If you want me to continue uploading valuable content without delays and to stay motivated in providing you with the best wisdom, I need your help. Every contribution, big or small, makes a huge difference. Feel free to donate and support Pure Wisdom so we can keep growing together. Your generosity keeps this journey alive.
If you're enjoying the content on Pure Wisdom and find value in the messages we share, I encourage you to subscribe. Based on the latest analytics, 93.9% of viewers are watching without subscribing. By subscribing, you not only stay updated with new content, but also support the channel's growth, allowing us to continue spreading wisdom for the chosen ones. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an important message. Let's build this community together.